On this episode of AV Week, hybrid work. We're still figuring that one out. All that and more coming up on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is episode 626, Structured, Flexible, Hybrid Work. Maybe. It's me, Brian, and this is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of all the news in the audiovisual world. I am your host, Brian Heidgerken, and joining me this week is Christa Bender, who is a Client Growth Manager and Hotspot Trainer at Pivot Communications. Hello, Christa.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing well. Also joining us this week is Jennifer Goodyer. She's the Sales Director at RTSales, Wave It, founding board member and host on the Women in AV podcast, which you can find at AVNation.tv. Good to see you again, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
No problem. Glad you're here. And rounding out our group this week is Bill Newman, Senior Solution Architect with Yealink. Welcome, Bill.
Nice to meet you all, and glad to be part of the group.
All right, so this week's first topic is one that I feel like we talk about most of the time when I'm filling in for Tim, but I think it's also something that our industries are, and all industries really are dealing with, is this remote to work, hybrid. There's tons of technology solutions out there, and I think we've got that pretty well figured out. There's some great stuff coming down the pipeline, but the tough part that we have yet to fix is the hybrid work, right? How does that work outside of the technology? We've got the technology, we can make it work, but how do you build the culture around it and make sure that the connections are still happening? And when reading the story this week that was in AV Magazine, I was remembering when I was with another integrator, another company earlier in my career, I worked in a small branch office. And so all of my meetings, I joined through video conferencing, the old school video conferencing, you know, where you had the codec and you had to have a special room, not this really neat stuff to where you can do it from anywhere. And we were talking with a video conferencing manufacturer and having our meeting with them, and they were telling about all their great new products, and he kept on talking about how it was as good as being in the room. You know, video conferencing is just the solution that you don't even have to think about it anymore. And then I went and asked him a question, and I startled him because he had his back to me the whole time with the monitors, and he goes, "Oh, Brian, I'm sorry, I forgot you were there." And I thought that was that's something I've always remembered about video conferencing is like, okay, we aren't there yet, right? But I think since COVID specifically, and with the new platforms out there and the new technologies, it's much better, right? We're all in the 4 pictures. Everybody's got their own little block. We've got cameras that can find each other. So again, I think the technology part is really much further along than the rest of the part. And in this week's big news was Zoom has joined Microsoft and Apple and Google, and they're kind of like, all right, everybody, we kind of want you to come back, at least a little bit. And I know there are some people, Business Insider has said, this is the death of hybrid work. But if you really get into the details, Zoom's ask's not that big, right? They're asking for 2 days a week, and only if you're within 50 miles of one of their locations. Because I work from home, hybrid. Clearly all of you are working home from hybrid, right?
Actually, I'm full remote, Brian. I've been full remote for over the past 7 years.
So, and that's kind of the point, right? Is it can be done. I mean, I know that I work remote mostly, but even when I'm in the office, the teams that I work with are all over the country, right? So whether I'm video conferencing from my office in one of our locations or I'm here in my basement, my workflow is still the same. So I think at least one of my big questions is, are they doing this because they can't figure out the hard part? And they're just like, you know what, we're just going to bring everybody back in at least a little bit because we know that? Or is there actually a benefit to being there?
I think that hybrid technology is getting so advanced, at least from what I'm seeing and what our integrators are requesting product-wise. I think that everyone's so focused on meeting equity that they're actually accomplishing it. So I think that hybrid is working when you do want to work remotely. And I think it's kind of dramatic to say that remote work is dead, because I don't think it ever will be. That's a little dramatic of a saying. So
it sells magazines, though.
Yeah, it does.
Page flips.
It does. So, but I don't think that's true. And I think with all of the new technologies, AI giving everyone their own square voice lift. So even if you're in the back of the room, your voice is just as loud as everyone else. I think that they're using hybrid more because it's becoming more efficient. And there is a side of it where it is nice to get in front of your team. And we all know that because when we go to InfoComm, we're all so happy to see each other.
That's so true. I think, as is usual, if we look at technology, the technology is certainly getting there. And that's the area where I play the most in, is at the device level. But someone who spends all day with devices, we have a tendency, not we as AV industry, but we as a society, tend to let the technology get ahead of the human condition. That seems to be, although it is the most important factor, it is the last factor to be considered. So you take my micro example. I went full remote back in 2003. And if the truth be told, back then, I spent the first year and a half, I spent as much time on the back of my motorcycle as I did at my desk. So I'll be the first to tell you that I did lose productivity because of that unsupervised environment. However, it doesn't take long to realize that if you're going to survive in that environment, you have to develop the discipline and the routine that pulls back your productivity. All right, so you do have to make a concerted effort to change your lifestyle, and that kind of blends into a topic that we won't go into today, but that is how far do you allow your profession to invade your private life? And, in my case, being early in this trend, back when we weren't remote workers, we were telecommuters. Oh. All right, if that's an old word I can throw out there. I was a telecommuter. All right, and it does take a while to figure out where that line is at. All right, now then you take the example of my wife, and she's in accounting. That is traditionally an office-bound position, and always has been. Whereas I've, for the last 20 years, been 100% remote. And when COVID came along and she was sent home, now fortunately her particular company transitioned to full paperless some time ago. And even though she's in accounting, she can do everything at home that she can do. But one of the strange remarks that she made to me, and it took me a little while to wrap my head around it, was that she actually wanted to go back because she missed the human interaction. Now, I don't know what that says about me, because we were in the same house all day long together, right? But other than my voice carrying too far, she missed going in. And what I found truly surprising was that, they were, of course, all through COVID, 100% remote, as everyone was. Then they had just completed a new $25 million headquarters building, and if anyone thinks that building was going to sit empty, they had another thing coming to them. But the building was actually completed during COVID, and now they've asked their people to come back 3 days a week. And my wife is thrilled that she now gets to go back in, and the only irritation she feels is that management can't make up their mind. Should it be 2 days a week? Should it be 3 days a week? Should it be every day, every other week? What? The constant changing and unpredictability But what really surprised me, and I don't think this is a generational thing, I think it is a human thing, because of the age of the people who were saying it, they were sent home to work, they adopted or adapted to that new environment, and now you have people who say, I shouldn't have to come into the office. Why should I have to report to work? I'm like, your employer, how do you tell your employer, keep paying me, but don't make me come to work? That I found very surprising. But what I am seeing, and what I think the net takeaway of COVID truly is going to be, is that, as Christa will tell you, remote workers have always existed. They always will exist. What COVID has done is expand the number of roles where you'll see dedicated remote workers, and also will allow traditionally office-bound employees to do some work from home. I think now we will always see an increasing trend of people returning back to the office, but what are they returning for? All right, I think less and less we'll see people returning just to punch that 5-day-a-week time clock, put their hours in, and go home. When I go into a Yealink office, I'm going in there for a specific mission. All right, and then I'm going about my other business. She goes in for her 3 days a week for specific purposes. And I think we'll see a lot more mission-oriented presence in the office. But at the end of the day, we still have senior management. Some of the senior management still have very traditional ways of thinking, and they want their people in front of them to a certain degree. All right, and how far this goes, I think we'll just have to take a little bit of time and let it settle in. I don't think we're ever going to go back to, the old days of 5 days a week punching a time clock for everyone who draws a paycheck. Those days are certainly gone. So remote work is not dead. That's hyperbole. All right, but I think that we will see an increasing number of roles. And I think we'll see maybe not a significant amount, but certainly a noticeable amount of irregular schedules in the office or abbreviated schedules in the office. And I think that has added to our quality of life. If you have the discipline and the routine to remain productive at home as you are in the office.
Yeah, Bill, since you brought up a spouse, I'm going to bring up my spouse's job. He is an ER nurse, and that is obviously a very taxing job on your body, and you kind of have to be there in person to do that job. And one day I was just simply curious because his knees were aching him, and I said, what's the game plan when you are old enough that being an ER nurse is just too painful on your body and you can't keep up with it? And just right away he said, I'm going to do telehealth. I'm going to be a remote nurse where the nurses that are on the floor that have questions, they don't know how to run the software, they're having charting issues, I'm sitting at a desk and I'm helping them remotely. And so that tells you right there, you can have a job that's as in person as an ER nurse, and there's still a remote position that is waiting for you.
Yeah, that's definitely been the upside of COVID, is that it really forced everybody to reevaluate that, because that's a great example, Jennifer. Like, I was reading articles about really remote places in the United States where they just are not. Maybe they're 50 miles or further from a local doctor, and telehealth has really become popular for them to be able to actually talk to a physician or nurse to get the care they need. I agree with Bill with a lot of the things he said. Like, when I became remote 7 years ago, I immediately took over one of my bedrooms, and it's my office now. Like, I don't, sometimes I'll be on my laptop downstairs in my library. Ooh, I sound fancy now. Or in my dining room. But for the most part, if I'm working, I come to my office, because I've also set it up the way when I had to go to an office. Like, I have 2 giant monitors. I have like everything dedicated to how I like to comfortably work. So that's, I think, a really big important thing. If you can do that, if you are working from home and you like to work from home, to give yourself that space so that you have a clear line between work and personal life then. Because I can just walk out of this room, close the door, and I'm done. I think I would be like Bill's wife though, because I'm a very personable person. I'm a very outgoing. If I was closer to my headquarters of work, they're all out in Utah and I'm in Philadelphia. And thankfully they didn't want me to move to Utah because I'm an East Coast girl. I'm not moving out there. So like being hybrid is not an option, right? Although I do see my colleagues, we do like work excursions a couple of times a year, or at least we did before COVID. But it's very interesting too, because I think like when Zoom is thinking about these things, I wonder if they're thinking about the whole employee experience, because there are people who did get forced into working remote or hybrid during COVID that maybe it was not a good choice for them. They are not regimented. Nobody ever wants to say, I need somebody looking over my shoulder, but they need that, right? They need that interaction with other people or that water cooler environment to talk things over. So going in and having the chance to go in and be a part of that a couple of times a week, probably, to me, that sounds amazing. And that could be what Zoom is thinking, is that I was reading an article actually earlier this week about how a lot of decisions get made when it's a small collective group of people. So you could be in a huge like sales meeting or whatever meeting with all your colleagues, but then a fraction of you, maybe 3 or 4 of you break off. You're probably talking about a specific project, and in that span of 5 or 10 minutes, you're getting things accomplished and knowing what next steps are. And that's the kind of thing that I feel you probably miss if you're remote or hybrid. Just having that chance to quickly grab somebody and say, hey, let's quick talk about this. Yeah, we can do that with Zoom or Teams or anything else. I mean, since COVID, well, actually, even since I've been remote, anytime I'm on a video call, I always share my video, unless like for some reason I'm eating lunch or something, because I want people to see me, because like that's a huge thing, is seeing somebody smile, see somebody frown, see somebody cross their arms, like Christa, you're talking too long. Like I need those visual cues. So I totally think like we have all of that capability now. It's just a reality of what is the mindset of the organizations that are trying to mandate people coming back. Is it that they want to fill these brick and mortar places because they're paying rent and all the utilities? Is it because they're caring about their employees and want them to have a better, more collaborative experience? Like, I think there's a lot of things that get wrapped up into it to try to figure out whether it's good or bad. And the reality is, because now, unless you're a frontline, nurse, police officer, or something like that, you probably have the chance to be remote or work from home. So now I think employees actually have more leverage to be like, well, you know what? Forget it. I'm not coming back in because I can go work somewhere else and be remote, or only have to go in 1 day a week. Whereas, 4 years ago, we didn't have a lot of those options. So I think, the employees are a bit more empowered with, if they're not afraid of change, to take advantage of that, to be like, okay, I really want to be hybrid or remote. What do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do every day? And then go and do that job.
Does this hurt Zoom? And Microsoft did it too, but does this hurt their business model by them? Is this them admitting that their product isn't everything that they've told everybody it is, to where it's like, oh well, Zoom is great, you don't have to have people there, but then they're like, well, you actually kind of need to have people come back. Is that, or is this just a reality check of, as you guys have all said, the mix is the important part, or the option?
If someone were to say that to me, the first thing I would suggest is, well, let's take away your UC platform and see how far you go. See what problems then develop. I don't think they hurt themselves. Of course, there will be those who play that aspect of it, but I think that anyone who denies the human factor is doing themselves a disservice, or just not being frankly honest. The UC platforms aren't going to go anywhere. All right, the plateau and this was remarked in the article, the plateau in the revenue is as much a factor as people making up their minds, all right, and saying, okay, well, I'm going to go with X versus Y. All right, I can tell you there are no lack of projects, either Teams or Zoom. All right, in fact, I'm picking and choosing which ones that I get into, because frankly, I don't have the bandwidth to do it all. I can't find enough qualified technicians to stand it all. All right, there's still a huge gluttony of capital available for these projects. Fortunately, much of the expense related to these are OpEx versus CapEx. So it's not as capital intensive as the heavy iron that we used to sell back in the day, where we were putting in, $100,000 bridges on a network. Now it's all done in the cloud. So it's much, much easier. And as much as people say, well, we're all coming back, try to take away their chat. Try to take away their video conferencing. All right, and you'll very quickly find out how dependent we are on it. All right, I'm fortunate in that the human interaction I get through video because of the nature of the work that I do. I'm on video 5-6 times a day with different peoples, whether it's pre-sales, post-sales, planning meetings, events like this. I have no lack of human interaction, even if it is at a distance. Whereas, again, my spouse, she's in accounting. Okay, she looks at invoices and PDFs all day. Big difference. Okay, so I don't feel like I'm on an island. But many people who aren't necessarily either sales or service oriented do have to find that interaction somewhere. And but they don't all want to go to work every day, oddly enough. They do like to work from home. All right, so I think there has to be an offering or an open-mindedness on the part of senior management to always make that part of the plan. All right, but yeah, I mean you can't do without it at this point. I mean, Zoom didn't get up. I mean, Teams didn't go from 60 million daily users 4 years ago to close to or over 300 million daily users in this time period, with there not being a need for it. So this is a case of being at the right place at the right time.
That would be an interesting experiment, right? If they forced everybody in and took away their UC or chat or anything, but then sure, like if they're wanting to use the excuse, and I'm not saying Zoom is, but let's just collectively say they want people in the office because they think that's how they'll better collaborate. So then if they took away their UC and other tools, does that mean that how they do their meetings change? Because I'm sure a lot of you experience days where you have back-to-back meetings, right? And actually doing it virtually over UC or with Teams or Zoom makes it really handy, right? Because I end that meeting and I launch the next one, right? Like I'm sitting here, so I can effectively do back-to-back. Yeah, I'll be tired mentally by the end of that, but I can do it. Whereas if you're in a physical building that maybe is multiple levels or it's multi-campus on multi-building and you're expected to be in person, are they going to then allow that travel time, right, to walk 5 minutes down there and then some bio breaks and all that? So, I just, that made me chuckle when you said that, Bill, because because when you start to think about it, like, yes, in person is great for a variety of reasons, but I think if companies are going to do that, they really need to explain to their employees why they want to do that, right? What are their reasonings to do that? And
exactly.
To take from Bill and Christa, Bill was talking about the different stages of planning, and Christa was talking about the efficiency that you can get from all of these hybrid workspaces. When you're doing a pre-planning call, that doesn't necessarily need to be in person. And it's sometimes a waste of everyone's time when you can just hop on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, have that pre-planning call, have that sales call, and discuss the paperwork and the nitty-gritty. And then when I need to show you a product in person, then we can do that, because that's the appropriate time to be face-to-face.
Precisely.
Well, Christa said something about, there are days where you have back-to-back meetings, and I was thinking, you mean there are days where you don't have back-to-back meetings? But
usually my Fridays I try to keep open. Actually, my company, we try to work just Monday through Thursday, right? But a lot of times Fridays I'll have rollover for me, where if I didn't get anything done in the 4 previous days, that's kind of my catch-up time. But I purposely do not take any client meetings on Fridays. It's very rare. Like I only will if I'm working on a project with them that has like a deadline that we need to to meet or hit, or if there's like some emergency where something's on fire. But that very rarely happens, right? Because I think also collectively over the last few years, people have started to kind of embrace that Friday quiet, whether they're not working or they are trying to use that as a catch-up day, admin day, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Meetings length, right? That's something I'm starting to see a little bit is you're not locked into, because they are virtual, you're not locked into those half-hour, hour chunks. I'm seeing more and more of 20-minute meetings that start, 5 minutes after the hour. And that gives everybody a little bit of a break between back-to-back meetings. But it goes to that concept of the meeting should be as long as the meeting needs to be. One of that phrase that everybody says, like, well, we're done early, so I'll give you some time back. And it's like, it's like, wait, no, you're just not going to waste a bunch of my time by making me sit here longer than it's necessary for us to do what we need to do.
Yeah, the time compression that we see is, from my perspective, a source of irritation, if you will, because there's for example, our portfolio, we build UC hardware, and we do a lot of time in development, and it takes a little bit of effort to impart to someone the value in which what we do. Why is this important? Why will it matter to you? And what I have found from, those would say, oh, you can never shut Bill up. And to a degree, they're correct. Right? But the fact of the matter is if I'm meeting, say, with an end customer, and that end customer, in my opinion, isn't being done justice if they don't come away with a good understanding of the solution and the product, or more to the point, how it's going to impact them. And that takes time to set the stage, to explain the pieces, and then to produce the workflow. And, this is good, this is a trade-off. Life is a compromise. And quite often, you can have feature A, but you're going to compromise on feature B. If you can live with that compromise, then you have a perfect solution. But if you don't take the time to draw out those subtleties, then by the time you get around to deployment, it really comes back to bite you, because if you don't explain it, then you live with their assumptions. Their assumptions after a period of time become fact. And as we all know, the secret to a happy customer is meeting or exceeding their expectations, which means you have to do a very thorough job of setting those expectations. And what I see too often is people wanting to do bullet point meetings. All right, let's get through all the high-level stuff. All right, but that leaves an awful lot to interpretation. Now, I know I have a somewhat biased view on this subject of time, because, again, it takes time to cover these details. And I really, really find it does disservice to everybody if you don't make the time to cover the details. All right, like one person, cover your whole portfolio in 35 minutes and leave time for Q&A. I'm like, are you kidding? You know how that's just not possible, right? It really isn't. I mean, yeah, I can give you bullet points in 35 minutes, but you're not going to come away with a comprehensive understanding. All right, and in many cases, that can be, in my case, can have long-term effects. All right, and I'm sure that applies to other professions as well, and other specialities. If you only talk about the bottom line, you never talk about the P&L that produced that bottom line, or whatever the scenario may be.
Sure.
So I understand everyone's under tight schedules. I'm certainly far, far more efficient in the office, because I can help anyone anywhere in North America, which is my patch. All right, can't do that effectively, comfortably, effectively from an airport, waiting in line to get on a plane, or But there are times that you do have to sit in the room, all right, where that's appropriate. And I used to believe, and dating back to the heavy iron days, where I always thought you could maintain a relationship on video, but you should never really try to create a relationship on video. COVID has changed my thinking on that. in that I have created many great relationships over video only to reinforce them more effectively in person later down the road. I don't know what your experiences are, but certainly this whole scenario has opened my eyes on the effectiveness of it. But it's had the reverse effect in time compressing everything.
Which is where, like Krista said, having that 5th day of quiet time or off time really falls in.
Yeah, I'm failing at that today, by the way. Like after this, I will have to do a little bit more work, but
I was about to say, did we ruin your day?
No, this is delightful. But it saves me from talking to my dogs, right? I'm actually talking to other humans on a Friday.
All right. Well, excellent. I really appreciate the conversation. I think this is something that we're, as a society, are still working out. We've all had those relationships, like Bill said, to where I know there are coworkers I work with that I've maybe met them in person 3 or 4 times, but I know what TV shows they watch. I know about their kids, and part of that is being purposeful in your interactions to make sure you plan for some of that. So, again, thank you guys all for being here. I don't think we're going to solve anything, but having the conversation helps, right? Getting those ideas out there. And there's other things that are coming technology-wise. I've heard of and been really interested in this concept of body doubling for people that work from remote and work from home, to where there's actually people that are streaming themselves working, and so you kind of have the noises and something of a coworker nearby, which for some people works out, for some people doesn't, and it's just finding that niche that works well for you. But Krista, if people want to get a hold of you outside of your appearances here on AVWeek, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. If they want to find me, you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever it is today. You can look for me by AV Christa, that's Christ with an A. You can find me on Instagram that way too, or Snapchat. LinkedIn, Christa Bender, Bender like the robot. If you want to find Pivot, who I work for, to see how they hired somebody so amazing like me, you can go to their website at pivot.marketing, and you can find them on the socials as well, Pivot SLC for Salt Lake City, because they're out in Utah.
I do have to admit, when I read your name, I did immediately think of the robot. So I'm sure.
And that's a
not
very
new.
age thing. I'm finding now that I realize I'm getting older, right? Like I usually say Bender like the robot, and a few times lately it's fallen, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm probably old enough to be their mom. They don't know Bender the robot.
That's criminal.
That's okay. It'll pop up again in a few years, and it'll be all the rage. Jennifer, if people want to get a hold of you or RT, how do they do that?
So I'm the most active on LinkedIn. That's Jennifer Goodyer. There's no A in that last name. And you can find more information about RTSales on rtsales.com. And please listen to our AVNation Women in AV podcast. And
you can find that at avnation.tv, YouTube, everywhere that you find your favorite podcasts. Awesome. Excellent. And Bill, when you're not out on your motorcycle ignoring your phone?
Yeah, when I'm not out riding around. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm not on any of the other socials, but it's just Bill Newman. The easiest way to reach me is just to shoot me a mail at bill.newman@yealink.com. That's the easiest way to get me. On LinkedIn, I have all of my email address and contact details, phone numbers, and so forth. So I keep that current. I like to be easy to reach.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys all for being here this week. I look forward to meeting you all in person sometimes. But again, have a great week, and check out avnation.tv or any place you find your favorite podcasts for more of AV Week or Women in AV or any other AV Nation podcast. There's a new episode of Architect, where we explore relationships between architects and the technology industry. And I hear the host is a really nice guy. So check that one out too. For all of us here at AV Nation, I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time.